Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the convention. We're glad to see you here bright and early on our first day. I am Peter Hauerstein, AIA, immediate past president at AIA Tampa Bay and principal at Soul Design Studio in Tampa. Before we start, if I can also remind everybody to silence their cell phones, that would be great. And I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. Her name is Victoria Schreibeis-Smith, AIA, NCARB, lead AP. She's the CEO and founding principal of Vera Iconica. It's a design brand focused on composing conscious life, providing services for architecture, interior design, wellness, kitchen design, and real estate developments. The company is a global pioneer in wellness architecture, the art and science beyond designing built environments that enhance human and planetary well-being, and is launching a podcast, The Architecture of Being, Composing a Conscious Life, to explore the impact of our surroundings that it has on us. Victoria has practiced architecture on 4 continents, continues to work, speak, and lead in think tanks internationally, and she founded the Wellness Architecture and Design Initiative for the Global Wellness Institute, and is the founder of the nonprofit organization Wellness Architecture and Design. So if everybody could please welcome Victoria, and we can start off our convention.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm Veronica. It is a pleasure to be here. I wanted to thank Peter and Wendy and Ignacio. I haven't seen Ignacio yet. Are you here? Hello, way back there. Just wanted to thank the AIA Florida for having me here today in this beautiful place. I have had the pleasure of speaking at the Breakers 2 other times for the Global Wellness Institute, so it feels very comfortable to be here, and I am so excited to be talking to my peers as architects and what we can do to improve our well-being. So this was the course description. I'm not going to read through everything. We don't have to read through learning points anymore, but I did want to kind of just preface what we're going to be going through today. I'm going to be showing, I won't be showing very much of my work, just a couple examples, but really the objective of today is to hopefully inspire and empower all of you to create more space for well-being in your life, in your practice, and in your projects. So one of the key points is the world that we're living in today is changing. It's not the same world that we were dealing with in the 20th century. There is actually a recognized paradigm shift that the United Nations and other people have been watching happen since the 80s. And this is a book by Jonas Salk. Who here knows who Jonas Salk is? Oh yeah, yep, polio. So Jonas Salk and Jonathan Salk in 1983 wrote a book called World Population and Human Values, and it talked about how there is a link between what we value as humans and that it is intrinsically tied to world population. Jonathan just republished this book a few years ago, A New Reality, and it's excellent. But some of the ideas in that book is basically what historically has been happening is our human population has been growing. And when we see this kind of growth, there are certain values that are associated with it. We think that there is endless limits, that we can just have consumerism, that we can throw things away at the end of it. There are certain attitudes that are also very advantageous. For example, if you're competitive, you're gonna get ahead. And that's been a good thing, to have a little bit of drive and a little bit of competition. But a lot of these behaviors end up leading to degenerative results. So when we look at this and we start to look at where we are today, sometimes it feels a little bit chaotic, especially the last 5 years. And we have to ask, where are we actually going? I'd like to change this a little bit. have more of a well-being message. I was laughing last night because I was flipping through the TV and I saw a show called The Kingsman. And in that, Samuel L. Jackson is basically trying to get everybody to kill themselves in order to save the planet, so I thought that was funny. But this is a possibility. There's different populations, different species follow this sigmoid curve. And basically, if they outrun their resources, they don't make it. But if they learn how to live in balance and in harmony, they end up making it. And so the species growth pattern looks more like this. So if we separate this out into Epoch A and Epoch B, we can start to analyze the different values that people have. So as I was mentioning before, where Epoch A was an either or, you could have a for-profit business and make money, or you could do good and have a nonprofit, right? Now we're talking about triple bottom lines, B corporations, and this idea that we can do good and make money. The mentality before was win-lose. Now people are starting to look for win-wins. We recognize that there's finite resources, that we have to start thinking differently about our economy, that collaboration is actually more important than competition, and it can be much more rewarding, and that we really need to start thinking about how we can sustain life. So what's especially interesting right now is that where do all of you think we are in this growth curve? How many people think that we are in Epoch A still? Okay, how many people think that we're in Epoch B? So you guys all passed the test. Half of you are in Epoch A and half of you think that we're in Epoch B. And the answer is we're actually at the inflection point. And it's when we're at inflection points that there's the most change, which is why if you're ever like, oh my God, the world feels chaotic right now, it is. Because we have people on different sides and we're figuring out what the balance is. But in 2016 was the first time in human history, besides some things like the Black Plague, where our growth rate actually decreased for the first time, and it has continued to decrease. So the big message is here is we're entering a new epoch. So what we need to identify as architects is that people's values are changing. We all have seen Maslow's pyramid, and if we start to relate architecture to Maslow's pyramid, we can see that at the very base level, a cave might have been just fine. Then we have safety needs, whereas that's where a lot of our codes live. Love and belonging, esteem needs. I would say that the majority of our careers have been spent at this kind of esteem level and below. You're always stretching up and reaching below, but in general, for the past few decades, we've been at this custom and luxury architecture. And this is where we're going as society goes up. So what does the architecture of self-actualization look like? And that's what we get to decide together as an industry. So as our values shift, we really have to understand what our clients want and need in order to understand what we want, what decisions that we're going to be making for them as architects, because we're in a really powerful position. We're specifying materials, we're deciding the performance level of a building, we're deciding and making design decisions and using design strategies that impact people's health, their well-being, their cognitive performance. It's every part of them. So decisions used to be made on some of these lower levels of fear and risk at safety. Love and belonging is really about happiness and convenience. Esteem needs are about indulgence and automation. Indulgence is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a really beautiful thing. It's to allow yourself to take pleasure in something, which I would guess that many of us in the room don't allow ourselves to take pleasure in things enough. We're working all the time. So that, again, automating, indulging, those can be very beautiful things in life. And then what people are looking for as self-actualization is they want a purpose. They want meaningful work, and they want their talents to be aligned with something that is purpose-driven and has a give back. So, love this quote. I think it's very easy in today's world to get away from this. So the shifts that we're seeing in the industry are going to reflect these values. So if some people in our industry keep doing the same things that we've been doing for the past few decades, that architecture is not going to serve future generations, and those buildings are going to have very short lifespans. So that's why we all have to start wrapping our head around this idea of where the future is going. I'm in the process of writing a book talking about this shift from environmentalism to wellism. I've been explaining what this shift is in terms of wellness, well-being, wellism. But basically what the philosophy or the idea is that this is where the majority of our projects live today, right? They consume energy, and we have had our buildings have very degenerative impacts. For example, in the 80s, it got so bad that the medical world discovered the term, or created the term sick building syndrome, right? So that was probably a little low point in our as an industry. But then we've had a green movement. It was really a step above. A lot of the buildings still consume energy. Sometimes they weren't always healthy, which is now why we have WELL, FitWell, other standards. And more of a focus on sustainability. The idea of sustainability is really interesting. It can be really hard for us to achieve in our projects, right? How many people have done a sustainable building? Awesome. So it's becoming like we are able to do these projects where 20 years ago they sounded like a stretch. But the question is, do we really want to sustain where we're at today, or do we want to start moving more towards a regenerative practice? So there's different levels. I call health architecture one of them, wellness architecture, and then I believe that there is even higher, that architecture has the ability to nourish our souls and elevate our consciousness. And there are scientific studies by neuroscientists that have put EKG on people's heads, taken them to non-ordinary architecture. And what happens is they see the frontal lobe shut down, so it's a similar state of being as in meditation. And when that happens, we enter a non-dualistic state, or what psychology calls our flow state. And so our consciousness is elevated. We experience more spiritual moments. We're brought into the present moment and experience more awe. So each one of us in this room design has the ability to really enhance people's life, not just make them healthy, but enhance them on a very deep level. So when we're in our office, when we're analyzing or just kind of having our own self-check of if we're delivering our promise for a wellness outcome to our clients, this is our wellness wheel that we created. And there's different aspects or different things that we're trying to design for. So I'm going to give two examples. I'm going to give a macro example of a multifamily project that we did in California, and then I'm also going to tell more of a personal story and talk about how this concept can be applied to one space. Okay, so we're going to apply these concepts to a master plan, then we're going to apply them to a room in the home. So this is a project that was about 380,000 square feet. It has 250 units that range from studio up to 3 bedrooms. It has about 15,000 square feet of commercial that include fitness, healing modalities, event space, a cafe and library that also can be rented out. And it has some growing gardens, hydroponics, edible landscape. And when we were looking at the master plan for this, we really wanted to celebrate. It's on a hillside outside of LA. And we really wanted to celebrate the place. We all know about placemaking. And what our neighbor did off to this side of the slide is they basically scraped the hillside down, made a platform, and did some buildings over a podium, right? That's the most cheapest, inexpensive way to go. And it really was an eyesore along the highway. But we said, well, how can we add character and community and really celebrate this place, and how can we connect our site? You see some paths going off into the distance. How can we connect our site to parks and hiking areas? They had some easements, utility easements that ran through the town, and we've identified those areas as really beautiful place to actually connect the community. So what we started to look at is, and the client was really wonderful, he was committed to the expense of undergrounding the parking lot. And so we analyzed how much square footage was used in open space, hardscape, and building footprint. And as you can see here, doing an activity like this, you really get to see what your priorities are. So we were able to preserve a lot of the green space. We had over a mile of hiking trails, and we really started to look at the building and say, okay, we know a double-loaded corridor is the most efficient. If we don't do a double-loaded corridor, we are essentially increasing the cost by 25%. But let's look at it. So we pulled the building apart, then we stepped it down because it was on a hill. And what that allowed us was to create 60% of the units that had at-grade access and little parks or green spaces, their own private green areas. And then every unit has a light on both sides, air and views. But what we were also looking at is working with the 35-foot height limit. And in order to add back that 25% that we had lost, we added a mezzanine level. So where the code allows three stories, we did 4 stories to get back some square footage, keep the 35 height limit as this steps down, and add back in some density. This slide is talking about materials. Andrew, sitting over by the window, gets credit for this slide. He's a building biologist and is our temple design wizard, among other things, but really is shepherding the use of healthy materials for our office. So the second example that I wanted to give you was a space in the home. So I wanted to share a little bit about a personal story. Oh, I'll share a personal story later. So when we're reimagining spaces in our centered around well-being, these 7 categories are the things that have been identified, not just by us, but by other people, Deepak Chopra being one of them, as the key indicators of your well-being. So as architects, we've said, okay, what does this mean if I turn this into architecture? So for emotional regulation, we've looked at the bathroom, and we also look at different science behind some of these. Sleep sanctuary, circadian rhythms, that might not just be limited to the bedroom. It might be, what is the person doing throughout the day? Where are they going? And how can we better foster healthy rhythms? Mental health. If you have a ritual that's important enough to integrate into your life, that ritual needs a designated space. So if somebody's been trying to add more mindfulness or meditation into your life and you don't have a designated space for that, you're probably going to continue to struggle with that, as will our client. So making sure that we have these spaces for those activities that are important. Connection to nature, nutrition. I'll be talking about the kitchen a little bit later. That's the room in the house that we'll look at closer. Life and harmony, and humor and movement. And those are my 2 little kids playing up there on one of our clients' water features. So this is my family, and I would say this is my family keeping it together because, you know, the next moment I'm pregnant again, our children's clothes are falling off, things are being eaten. And we just can't take a picture without somebody being disciplined, cheeks being squeezed, you know, we're all over the place. So one of the things that I was doing while trying to run a business was feed myself and my family healthy, and I was really failing. And I was buying a lot of organic produce and doing shares, vegetable shares, and I would get things in the share and I didn't know how to cook it, and my food was going bad, and I felt really frustrated. And so it occurred to me that the design of the kitchen was failing me. So we started to look at, if we knew nothing about kitchen, what a kitchen is, what it's used for, and all we knew was, I want to eat a whole food, nutrient-rich, which means a lot of vegetables in my diet, what needs to change? So we went through and we identified these 7 areas. We later condensed them down to 6. And then we did a little project. We did a conventional kitchen on the left-hand side, and what small changes, manageable changes we would make on the right-hand side, and came up with 18 different points. So here's that image a little bit closer. This kitchen is really based off of a 1950s design, which in the 50s a lot of beautiful things happened in terms of convenience and technology to allow people to work, women to go into the workforce and prep food easier. At that time, though, we just didn't know that all of the technology that came out of post-war food, the person that was going to win the war was the one that could feed the front line. So you have all of these high caloric, preservative-laden foods that are now being brought into the mass marketplace that are shelf stable and basically nutrient depleted and non-living, but they have the calories, right? And so today we're in a position where 7 out of 10 deaths in the United States, according to the CDC, are preventable. They're from a preventable illness or disease, and the #1 contributor to that is our food. So again, that's why we did this project, which has led to creating a new company that says, okay, well, all of these cupboards and these pantries are really designed to keep dead food. How do we keep living food? So we shared this idea actually here at the Breakers. I introduced this idea, and a few months later was invited to Orlando, Florida, to participate in a prototype home. WIT stands for Wellness Home, built on information and technology. And some of the partners in the home are over on the right-hand side. And so the room in the house that we took care of was the kitchen. So this is what the kitchen looked like before we got there. And this is what the kitchen looks like today, if you're to visit the home, which it is open. Real to Refined, that was just a little reminder to me to say that this WIT home was built and priced for middle class to upper middle class. That was kind of the market segment we were going to, but these same strategies could be applied to affordable housing, which we had some on the California project I shared with earlier. A lot of the work that our firm does is high-end custom luxury residential in the Mountain West. And so, there's even more time and more resources to be able to play with some of these concepts, but they do work across the board. But first of all, we looked at delivery goals. Some of our goals were fresh food, having gardens. How do we eliminate packaging? A net zero kitchen would be awesome. I still don't know how to do that. But these are some of the things that we're playing with, is how can the design of the kitchen promote these things? So we have growing gardens and growing cabinets. The growing cabinet on the right is sized for a family of 4 to have 2 salads a week, and it can grow lettuces, herbs, things like that. We also have climate-controlled cabinetry, where you can control the temperature, the humidity. There can be running water through them for things like chives or cilantro, so that your food continues to grow and you're eating living, fresh food. And we were also looking at the nutrient value and nutrient preservations. There's some really interesting things that you can do with light that actually kill free radicals, so that can keep your food fresher for longer. And that not only preserves the nutrient value of your food, it also helps financial well-being because your food's not going bad as quickly. This is a project that we did in Jackson, Wyoming, but really centered around gathering and creating different gathering places, because the idea here is that all of us have come from the past few decades where it's been really popular to do a diet, right? It's Atkins, or it's you are what you eat, and you're not supposed to eat any fat, or, you know, there's just these different myths around food, and really where food is going is personalized nutrition, where you can take samples of your gut and you can actually see what you're processing, what you're digesting, what you're lacking. And this is really the future of food. So getting everybody in the kitchen, getting them understanding what they can eat and how to prepare it is where our firm predicts that the future is going. Preparation needs to be easy. Cleanup needs to be really easy. The ergonomics, we created something, we really were bothered by this trash compactor, this idea that I can send more garbage to a landfill, and because that landfill isn't directly in my backyard, I don't really care where it's going. But you know, in Wyoming, back on ranches, every ranch had a little dump, and nobody wanted to see their dump get any bigger than what it was. So it's, you know, it's very real. That stuff doesn't go away, it goes somewhere. So instead of this trash compactor, we said, okay, if we're eating more vegetables, how can we replace that with compost? And so we've have looked at developing something called the Fropost, which is frozen compost, so you don't have fruit flies, smells like that. And there's a lot more farmers, the farm to table movement is getting large enough. There's a lot of urban areas now that are doing compost pickup in addition to recycling. So these things are not far away. They're actually things that you can implement today, even if it sounds like a new idea. Cooking, we have multiple cooking sources. Cleanup, I talked a little bit about that before, but the final thing that I wanted to do today was, I hope that by sharing that macro and micro areas that there are maybe some ideas that you all have of how you could integrate it, because that's the point. You know, if we're on this paradigm shift and the whole industry is shifting and our clients' needs are changing, how does that impact all of us today? So I'm just gonna do a quick time check. We have about 15 to 20 minutes. So what I wanted to invite everybody to do was some writing and journaling. I think a lot of you got notepads. So I'm gonna walk us through 2 exercises and then invite people to share their answers. There's gonna be a couple microphones in the back, but we're gonna journal first, share some thoughts, and then I have 2 exercises for us. So exercise 1 is, how can you create space for well-being in a current project? So if you have a current project and something you saw today kind of turned that light bulb on, oh, I could integrate this, I would love to, I'd love for you to write about it, and then those willing to share, we'll do a little bit of sharing too. So part 2 of the question is, what hurdles do you see in whatever you just wrote down, in creating space for wellness wins in every project in your practice. What's the biggest fear that you have or hurdle that would stop you from creating healthier places and spaces and breaking away from maybe some conventional practices that you recognize are no longer serving us or the planet? We're getting deep in the morning. And what could you or your firm do to overcome this hurdle? Okay. Is anybody willing to share what they wrote? We're going to need a brave volunteer that will kick everybody off. All right, we have up here. Peter will bring you a microphone so everybody can hear you. And oh, yeah, got one back there. And if you can just let us know your name, the firm you're with, and then the project, and then we'll get you, sir, next. So go ahead.
Sure. Hi, my name is Margaret Logus, and I actually am a student at the University of Florida Graduate School of Architecture, the City Lab campus in Orlando. And what I really loved was the bigger windows in the kitchen, because I'm actually going into historic preservation as well as architecture. And I love the idea of the bigger windows and bringing that kitchen and eating space more into the outside, more like what the historic homes used to do. It's like the kitchen was, you got your food right out the back door or nearby, and you integrated that more freshly grown or freshly caught or killed or whatever food. So I like that idea of the bigger windows and integrating that with the outside. So my thought was make it a space where you can easily be outside with like porches or more light spaces and bring that light in and be able to grow your own food like that cabinet showed, having your own food growing in the house or very close by the kitchen or by the back door. And integrating that more natural food source into the home and making it part of your lifestyle again. Like, it can grow while you're at work, it can grow while you're gone, it can be right there nearby and you can just pick it and eat it. So that's what I like that. And of course the hurdle would be getting that natural light in there for it to grow all the time and to be a constant source, and getting the natural positioning to have that light or a source where you could grow it from. Yeah. Every climate is different, every area is different. We live in zone 7, which is the coldest, harshest climate, and my family just started a garden, had no idea what we were doing, did not have time to weed it, and my son would, run in, eat, like, I saw him eating leaves once, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, you can't just eat nature. What are those things? And he looked at, he was 4.5, and he was like, Mom, it's just kale. And he'll come in with dirt and have carrots. Peter, we have a gentleman up here in the front. Yeah, right there.
Hi, my name is Lee Goodson. I have a small firm in Seagrove Beach down in Northwest Florida. One of the things we've started doing is introducing garden planting around swimming pools and things like that in residential locations. You have to put landscaping around pools anyway, and using those planting strips as gardens. So we find that homeowners enjoy having gardens. They just don't want to be overwhelmed with a lot of gardening, but you can plant tomato plants and beans and all kinds of plants like that as to go around the walls of swimming pools and things like that. The challenge to that is how to deal with some of the waste. We've come up with things like composting towers where you can put small drums and put hay in the bottom of them and cut the bottoms out of them, and then put composting in different layers and then bring the soil out from behind it. And you mentioned weeds. We use the compost to control the weeds in the gardens because you can just cover up the weeds with the compost and it kills them. The heat from the composting generally kills the weeds. So that's something we've been trying to do to introduce some of these concepts. Some of the wives don't really care for that, but the guys seem to get pretty excited about it because they can do some farming around the swimming pools. The hardest thing is to introduce these concepts to the clients early so they understand why you put tomato plants around their swimming pools instead of boxwoods or something like that. So that's one of the things we've been trying to do to get them to understand, why we're introducing, cabbage and tomato plants for their landscaping instead of boxwoods and other succulents.
Yeah, thank you. Is anybody willing to share how they could, maybe if you're willing to put wellness design strategies in every project, what's one of the hurdles that you're kind of like, I don't know if this is realistic, or would somebody share some of the challenges that they see?
We're doing a project now, which is approximately 50 acres, of which 35 acres is wetlands, and we got a little bit of highlands, 17 acres approximately, and we're developing now into 180 townhome rental projects, 2-story structures, and we're maintaining 70% of the property in its natural state. We're building bridges through there, making walking paths. We're making it open up to the public so they can come through and see the wildlife that lives in the area. But it's very hard to find a client that'll do that. Everyone is dollar conscious, and I love your ideas about kitchens. The problem is the average unit we do today, it's not in the price point to be able to do it. You're hitting above middle class to create that effect because of the cost problems with it, especially down here in South Florida. I have clients paying $80,000 to $100,000 per unit land cost for rental projects, and the rents start at $5,000 a month. Those people can afford it, but when trying to do something that someone can move into for $1,200 a month, you can't implement what you want to do. In fact, the city of Fort Lauderdale, we just finished a project, townhomes, and we went to reuse gray water from the sinks, and we helped put a cistern in to hold the water and purify it. The county turned it down. They're afraid it's going to, the water, if there's anything contaminated in the water, that's going to spread and cause diseases through the area. So it's a very hard process on both sides, government and developers. So I have great aspirations for what you're doing, and it looks beautiful, but in reality, most projects, we can't put that type of money into it, what it costs to develop the type of projects you're talking about.
I have a good resource for you. Have you heard of the Center for Active Design?
No.
Fitwell. They're based out of New York, but the CDC basically wrote some guidelines for spaces to ensure wellness, similar to WELL, but a little bit different. And the Center for Active Design has been doing a lot of affordable housing projects. And you're right, some of the things that I shared with the kitchen, those aren't directly, it's on that continuum. There's something that's very going to be budget friendly, but also, these people that have to work hard and often multiple jobs to make it, there needs to be a strategy that's appropriate for them all the way up. So there's this kind of continuum that all of us get to decide on what's appropriate for the climate and the client. But there are a lot of people that are doing affordable projects and making the numbers work. So there are precedents out there. But it is a challenge because it's not how we've been doing things. And if you're working with a developer or owner, they have their formula, they have the way that it's been done before, and they're going to try and push that way. So what we do in our office is not every single one of our projects is ideal from a wellness perspective. So what we do is we really try and focus on our wellness wins. If we can do one thing on that project that's really cool, that the client is into and excited about, you know, how can we celebrate that and get everybody excited about that? And that a lot of the developers that we've been working with now, they actually know that they need to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. So they're coming to us because they need to do something different in order to attract, you know, the tenants that they want. So anybody else? We'll do one on this side of the room, and then we'll come over to this side of the room next.
So when I built my house, I tried to do a gray water system, and the local health department turned me down also several years back. Is there some route you can take the through some other agency that you can point to the health department and say, hey, look, I'm doing this as an experiment or a research? I mean, that was the dead end I hit.
Yeah.
How do you get past that?
Yeah. You know, that happens. You know, the other interesting thing when it comes to water is the Rocky Mountain Institute in Aspen in Basalt built a really beautiful building, and they designed it to be net zero waste and net zero water. But the issue wasn't the wastewater permit, the issue was water rights. And so the state of Colorado didn't want them collecting water and using it, even though they were also showing that they were going to put it back, you know, into the groundwater. But they designed, you know, what they chose to do was design the building for it anyways. Their building was experimental. So they designed the building for it anyways, knowing that it might take a little bit longer to get the regulating bodies to come along. So the other things that we've done, you know, we did a project in Orlando, and you were required to hook up to the city grid. So we designed a net zero home for electricity and gas, but we had to hook up to the city anyways. And so what we were going to do as an experiment was meter the electricity, and water too. And then we were actually going to measure, we were partnered on that project. The client was a NASA scientist, so we were pretty lucky in terms of the technology that we had access to. And for him, everything was easy. You know, we'd be like, oh, I don't know how to do that. And he's like, oh, it's easy, it's a sensor, I can do that. I did that and I sent it to space already, it's fine. So, but you know, we were going to play by the rules, but then we were going to share and publish the data of, is our water healthier from the rain or from the city? Are we actually net zero? And then for the net zero gas, we had a biogas digester that was going to power harvest the methane gas and power outdoor grill and tiki torches. So that was pretty fun. We'll go over here, Wendy.
Good morning, Bill Bishop, ALS Architects. This has been a very fascinating discussion, and it's, in my mind, it's run the gamut. But to go back to your original question, number one, how do you create space for well-being in every project? It's not a space, it's space, something. And the next question is, what hurdles do you see in creating space for wellness in every project? The answer to that is there are no hurdles. And I use I call him the conscience of Jacksonville architecture, Bob Broward. He studied under Frank Lloyd Wright, and his philosophy was do something good in every project. You kind of talked about that a little bit. It doesn't matter what it is. 99.5% of every project built are utilitarian to solve a problem. They're never going to be great works of art. They solve a problem through the built environment. Every time we do a project, do something, no matter how small it is. And every project has different challenges and different opportunities. And for those of us that say, well, we have clients that can't afford it, economics is not just a good idea, it's the law. Everything has to be funded or it doesn't get built. And so you work with what you're given. That's our job as architects, to do the best we can.
Yep.
Every time. And so there's the interesting thing about this whole discussion today, there's nothing new here under the sun. It's all the stuff we've all been talking about since however old we all are. We've been doing this since the beginning. Just do good work as best you can, and you've solved what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody a couple days ago, and they were asking me about wellness architecture. And I said, well, it's actually kind of ironic and sad that I'm even going around talking about wellness architecture, because the reason there has to be wellness architecture now is because we took a bad path somewhere along the line. But you know, there are a lot of beautiful buildings and very elegant, poetic wall assemblies, floor assemblies, roof assemblies, building techniques that are older. So you're absolutely right. It's not new. It's actually something that, as we've been tinkering with it, as we've been trying to overcome nature, keep it out, we come up with sheet goods, we have more technology, we use more synthetics, and we actually have been making our buildings more complicated with dew points that are then causing mold and mildew and rot. We're making our lives harder, and I think it is now time to go back and make our lives a little bit easier. And then again, keep in mind that paradigm shift. You know, when something doesn't feel like it's going to be possible for the project, I mean, think about what COVID did. COVID made everybody more aware of the quality of their indoor air. Who wants to go back to ASHRAE codes? In 2015, the School of Public Health at Harvard did a study that showed that buildings built to code diminish our cognitive performance by up to 70% across different areas. So it was a double-blind study, and the amount of CO2 and pollutants in the air actually hurt people's ability to operate at their highest level. So depending on what project you're talking about, that's a very compelling story. If you have a workplace and they're operating at 70% because you just barely met code to make your to make your budget work for your building. Well, the budget for your building as a company is going to be about 8% of your operating costs over the lifespan of that building. The rest are going to be in your staff and your people. And if you can get them to work from 70% up to something, you're going to more than make that money back. So part of it as architects is we really need to understand the business models behind our developers, whether they're multifamily and residential or their workplace wellness, and start speaking to them in terms that they understand the value proposition and they understand how this wellness material system, whatever it is, something that's more sustainable, that wellness win, how it's going to have a payback in your building. And it is possible on every project. So we have a second exercise here, and I wanted to get a little bit more personal with this one. Is as an industry, a lot of times we're overworked, we tend to be perfectionists, to be workaholics, and it's very hard to break away from old habits or even old specs or old details if you don't have a certain level of well-being in your own life. And all of us, including me up here, I have about 1 million things in my life that I want to work on. What is something, how can you create space for more well-being in your life?
think about the natural phenomena, starting with the daylight, view, the human psychology, and the clean air and the water. These are all the natural things that's around us. We got to take the best advantage of these phenomena to begin with, for the human psychology or the human soul. That's the beginning point, I guess, Then when we design, okay, how can I get the daylight to this room, this area or so, and the water, clean air, just go with the natural things first to begin with, and start thinking early in the project.
Yeah. For those of you that didn't catch that, he said, we have to take advantage of the natural phenomena, the things that are free and very simple: air, light, water. Second part to this is, what is the biggest disruptor of well-being in your firm culture? And how could that shift? These are the really fun ones. And yes, if your boss is here, you still have to share. Except for you, Andrew.
Time management, priorities, what is more important than what is not so important. It's time management.
All right, as we share on this one, I'm going to see if we have any volunteers on this side of the room in the back. So there was a couple down there, Wendy. And we have about 7 more minutes to end on time today. So we'll take a few questions. We'll take a few answers, and then we can open up to just any general Q&A that hasn't come from this discussion, and we'll close up. So that's how we'll use the last 7 minutes of our time here today. So, yeah, if you can say your name, who you're with, and then thank you for sharing.
Hi, Glenn Hettinger from Jacksonville and GDH Architects Photography. I got inspired by some friends that I should start swimming laps at least every other day, if not every day. So I wanted to have a 25-yard lap pool in my backyard, and that didn't work real well. The cost is rather prohibitive of doing something like that. So I'm interpreting the how can you create space for more well-being as how do you create more time? It's space or time. So in creating the time, I can use the lap pool that's a mile from my house, that's public, that I can use, and that works. So I'm just saying that making time is just as important as making space. And then the other thing is, what's the biggest disruptor to well-being of your firm and culture? We have been in the habit of accepting unrealistic, ridiculous deadlines for our work for years and years. At least I have been. And with
You're the only one.
With the wonderful economy that we've experienced the last couple of years, we're able to just say, yes, we could take on that job for you, and we could start it 1 month from today. And then they immediately say, oh, well, I got to call someone else. And they call around, and they come back to you and say, you said you could start it in a month, is that right? Okay, we'd like to go with you. And so, if we just don't give our clients ridiculous deadlines, that will change our culture, and that will all be healthy. And in my case, I will be able to make time to swim a mile every other day.
Yeah, And you won't just be impacting your ability to swim a mile every day, you're gonna be impacting the health of all of your staff. Who else?
I'm Valerie Slack from AIA Treasure Coast, and I have a small firm. It's myself and 2 part-time employees. And I agree, time is the greatest resource that we have, and that is the place where we have to find our well-being. So we work on a very flexible schedule. I work with my employees, and we found through COVID that we kind of revolutionized how we work. We use Dropbox as our server. People can work from home if they prefer, or they can come into the office. Our office is in an old repurposed building that was once a hotel and is now many small office suites, but we don't have operable windows. So we found ourselves shifting gears for our health to doing a lot of work remotely and using virtual meeting spaces and screen shares to collaborate with one another and check drawings in and out. And people can work on the schedule that works best for them. We coordinate best using technology. And then some days we're in the office together. We try to be as flexible as possible so that people have time to take an exercise walk in the morning or go to the gym or find space to be well and then come together. And this wonderful economy has given us a great gift of saying, we can't help you for another 6 weeks, but we can start on this date. And that's become acceptable.
Yeah. I think the point that the last 2 people have touched on is the shift towards wellness. Sometimes, we do take the unreasonable deadline, or we try to get more work in, and especially as a principal of a firm, at a larger firm, you now have to feed the beast, right? You have to take in work, you have to make sure that there's enough work. And so really knowing what your forecasting and allocation is, and designing your business model around thinking about your staff's time and how many hours a week that they have in order to stay healthy, right? I mean, how many of you would change the amount of work you brought in if none of your staff worked over 40 hours a week? And how do we have business models where that's still profitable? Anybody else? All right. Last one over here, and then after this, we'll just open it up to, we have about 2 minutes left, and just any general questions.
Hello, Nick Rosalind, Vero Beach also. And this is personal experience related to the 25-foot lap pool. And I think as architects we work way too much, and associated with that I have a guilt about taking personal time to read, learn, watch things that would help me do my job better. And I was fortunate enough I actually bought a used treadmill from Orange Theory. Awesome piece of machinery. This is a heavy-duty commercial. And I put it in my office with a computer screen in front of it mounted on the wall, and that allows me to, for an hour a day, 2 30-minute times, I'll get up and I will watch a YouTube video on ArchiCAD tutorial, or watch a TED Talk, or anything that I'm interested in, or checking emails. And that has been, for me, just a tremendous pleasure. And it's guilt-free exercise and learning, so.
Yeah, you're integrating it. Okay. Anything else before we close today? We have one back there.
Hi, I'm Roger Godwin with DAG Architects in the Panhandle. One of the things that is interesting to me is that through COVID, and we all work in offices, we all mostly build spaces for people who work in offices or hospitals or schools, but we talk about the flexibility and time and things like that, but one thing that's really came home to me during this whole time is that there's only about 30% of our working population that have that opportunity. 70% of the people, there is no opportunity for flex time. There's no opportunity to work from home. So how do we create a culture that actually creates more of a well-being versus a building or a space when you have to recognize that 70% of the people have no option? So I'd like your thoughts on that.
I think that's a great question to take back to your firm and to identify those hurdles and then say, how can we change those hurdles? And it might be looking at a closer look at your business model too, like what we were just saying before, is if you invest in remote work, because there's some cost savings, there's also some cost increases, right? Just the numbers on your budget are kind of shifting or moving around. And so it's there are solutions. There's one of Ignacio and my friend, Scott Simpson, I have 3 kids. I came off maternity leave. My company tripled in size. I'm trying to feed I'm married to a Southerner, and he expects me to be home and cooking and cleaning and doing these things. We all are just as wealthy as one another when it comes to time. Everybody has 24 hours in a day. And so how are you going to change your firm culture for yourself and for your staff and for your clients? Because healthier, happier people are more creative and they create better products. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you for participating.